in the midst of a series, and we're talking about chaos. And we all have chaos throughout our life. Today, the chaos that we're going to discuss is the chaos of conflict. Last week we talked about how many times we cause chaos, but we need to clear our temple. We need to learn to literally free ourselves of some of these things, and then we've got to give it to the Holy Spirit in and have someone close by to us. But there still is this conflict, and that conflict arises many times when it comes from relationships. And relationships are probably the most difficult area to have a discussion about. And if you don't believe that, ask anybody that's ever been through a divorce. Ask anyone that's had a rebellious child that they just wanted to love and care for. Ask anyone that's ever had a friend that's turned their back on them completely, and when it was least expected. We've all had that chaos in our life, and many times it comes back to that relational side. The difference is with the relational side of it, is it can be the one that can hold us down the most, hold us down the longest, and hold us back from what God wants us to do in our lives. And so as we talk about this conflict today, I'm going to address something here recently that came up. And I just think it's important to understand kind of the side of maybe some people that have been there. As most of you know, I was ordained, I don't know how many years ago now, but I was ordained in a church known as the Acton Baptist Temple. I grew up Catholic, and I was ordained in the Baptist Temple, and that's pretty much, that covers everything, kind of two realms of Christianity on both sides. When my pastor came to me at first and said, hey, I want to ordain you, I did what probably anybody would do, looked at him and said, you have to be crazy, why in the world would you want to ordain me, and why would I want to be ordained? So my wife and I prayed about it, we talked about it, and the more that we had that discussion, the more that we realized that God was saying this is the steps that we should take. So is it always easy? No. Is it something that everybody should do? Absolutely not. Is it a calling? I don't know. I'll talk to God about that, when it's time to have that discussion with Him. But the bottom line is that the church that I got ordained at, I was very happy to be ordained at, and the person that ordained me was what meant more to me than anything. Dallas was a younger pastor when he came back. He came back under very trying circumstances, the Acton Baptist Temple. He was not supposed to lead the Acton Baptist Temple. He had already gone off to start a church way down in Florida, and one thing led to another, and he had to come back, and he did so because that's what God was calling him to do. But here recently, what came out was that the church that I was ordained in was no longer how the headline read said, the once segregated Acton Baptist Temple is now no longer, kind of along those lines. And so the person that they're ripping on is a guy that died 50 years ago, 45 years ago in there somewhere, and that he started this church to be a segregated church, and there's nothing further from the truth. In fact, the things that I were taught when I was there that came from Dallas, the grandfather, to Charles, the son, to Dallas, the grandson, is that the Bible teaches the human race. And so that's what I've always learned. And it's, black and yellow, green or white, or however it goes, we're all precious in His sight. And we are. And so when it comes down to it, that's what we were taught. So as a youth pastor, before I was ordained, I was challenged to go to the different schools. And the school that I went to the most was a inner city school, and that was Akron Garfield. And at Akron Garfield, there's all kinds of kids from all different backgrounds. And the group that I hung out with that was there were white kids, there were black kids, there were Asian kids, there were kids from the Middle East. I mean, we met everybody. We talked to everybody. We had fun conversations, and we talked about God and what God meant, in their life and in our lives, and that's what I was taught. And the Acton Baptist Temple had a huge impact on that. And I'm very, very thankful for it. But I don't believe that the young Dallas, who is here, who learned from his father, Charles, who was one of the greatest missionaries that you and I will ever know or not know if you haven't met him. And he went from country to country to continent to go and share the gospel. And he didn't stop and say, well, I can't go to that one because, there's this race that's there and I can't reach out to that race. That never came up. But he was then taught by his grandfather. And where the church originally started was a predominantly white area. We don't put a sign out that says, you know, this race only can come into this church. I don't believe any church would do that. But I certainly know that the one that I grew up in, growing up Catholic, surely didn't, but we lived in a very white community. That's just what it was. And we were taught the same thing about human race. So when I went to the Baptist temple, I never thought about what the color of people were. And it never came up. It didn't matter. But let me tell you two quick stories here. And once again, this is passed down. There's a church in Akron known as the House of the Lord, and it's Bishop Joey Johnson. I believe that's his name. Before he was a bishop, he was just, Pastor Johnson, and he had his sanctuary for the House of the Lord. They wanted to build a new sanctuary. They wanted to build a larger sanctuary. But they wanted to get the feeling for it to make sure that it was the right size. So Joey and Dallas, Joey is black, Dallas is white, they got to have a conversation about it. He's like, we're way over here in Rolling Acres, you're kind of down here in the middle of Akron, and I want to see if the sanctuary is a good fit for us size-wise. And so Dallas was like, just go have a service there. Bring everyone in and have a service. And Joey then said, well, that's awesome. Can I invite your congregation as well? Now, you think about this for a second. If there's a racist anything in Dallas, who's been taught by Charles, who's been taught by Grandpa Dallas, his answer is going to be this. You know what? No, I think it'd be better if we kept the two separate. You guys have your service that night, we'll have ours in the morning. Let's keep the two separate. That's not what Dallas said. Dallas said, I think it'd be great to invite both of our congregations together for that, and then that way you have even more people in there for you to decide if this is the size of the sanctuary you want. And so my mom and dad had come in from New Mexico, and they only came in, once a year. And they were home during that time and said, you want to go to the service? They grew up Catholic, and so there were some strong Catholic groups here. And they're like, no, we don't want to go to that service tonight because of their upbringing from the denomination. Well, we went to it that night. And I'm going to tell you what, it was one of the best services I have ever been a part of. Ever. And there was one racial word that would be seen as racial, and I don't believe at all that it was meant to be racist. At all. Not one part of it. But there was a time, because when you're in a Baptist church, like if you've ever been to like a Pentecostal kind of stuff, man, people are raising their hands and they're raising the roof and they're, all kinds of stuff. And, the hands start here, then they get to here, then they're doing jumping jacks. I mean, all that kind of stuff, just depending on the church you're from. Well, if you're not used to that, I mean, I grew up Catholic, so it's like, genuflect, kneel, stand, whatever. It's like head and shoulders, knees and toes. That's what I grew up with. So, but people didn't just leave their hands up. So when we got there, they start singing it, and people start raising their hands up. Well, as a Baptist upbringing, you just don't do that. Now, that's not the Bible either way, right? But because you can't lift your hands to the Lord, it's okay. And he turned around, and they had the choir, they're in the robes, and they were singing. This is Joey Johnson. When I say they, this is Joey Johnson's church. They were swaying back and forth singing, and they were good. And I was really liking this. And then he turned and he said, if you're feeling it, it's okay for you to raise your hands. And so I just a natural thing, I looked around and I'd never done that. And the people from his church were raising their hands, but people from our church were kind of stood looking at each other, and then he said this, even you white people can raise your hands. And I was like, yes! And so I raised my hand. And I was like, but I didn't think he was looking down at me, and he didn't say anything derogatory. And it was just a Holy Spirit charged, wonderful event. That was one pastor helping out another pastor, one church helping out another church. It had nothing to do with denomination. It had to do with God's human race. If there was any part of Dallas that was racist, that conversation would have never taken place, let alone that service. And if it would have been a service, they would have segregated it. And they didn't. And that was learned behavior from him. Now here's, I'm going to pass forward for you for a couple years after this. Being a pastor when your legacy is 70-some years and you're handing the grandfather down to the son and then to the grandson, it's tough. And Dallas and I became close friends and still are. I love him to pieces. I'd go to battle with him any day of the week, anywhere, anytime. And I just believe his heart is that strong in the things that he's taught. He got to the point where he was exhausted. He was just tired. And he told me, he said, John, I'm just tired. I need to rest. And I'm like, it's really, really okay. So he went to a church in southern Florida. And they do a lot with recovering pastors, where they bring them in and they kind of rest for a while, and then they slowly get them back out to where they can send them out. So he went there, and one of the things that he was big on is he was discipling the other pastors. This is a huge church, 20-some thousand people a week kind of church. And for those of you that don't know, when Dallas speaks, he will tell you, you're going to be jealous now, he will tell you, if I can't teach you a message in 22 minutes, then I can't teach you a message. So man, he was down to 22 minutes and he was done and he was out the door. And the reason for that was because they did everything for radio and for television. So in 22 minutes, man, he saw it and he was out, and if he was in the middle of the sentence, he was like, let's pray. Everyone got up and they prayed and they moved on with their lives, right? He would tell you that. So when he went down to this church, they were used to 45 to 55, sometimes over an hour as far as the messages went. So Dallas spoke, and he had spoken the longest he had ever spoken. It was like 30-some minutes. And the guy came in and he said, hey, you set a record. And Dallas was like, oh no, what did I do? What did I do wrong? He was like, shortest message in the history of our church. We like you. And the guy walked out, and that was it. So, but Dallas was recovering, and he was in that stage of recovering. And there was a house that was down there, and it was a kind of a drug house where they were helping people rehabilitate. And there was a mom that was there, and she had a son. And that son was not being raised the right way because the mom could not get off of the drugs. There was nowhere for this young man to go. And Dallas became his full-time guardian. I tell you that story because this young man was African American. And he never thought twice about it. In fact, it was more difficult on him when he had to give him back to the mom, but the mom turned her life around completely, while Dallas took care of this young boy until she was healthy enough to take it, because he knew that that was the right thing to do. Those are the people that built the Akron Baptist Temple. And there was never any intention of, we're going to segregate this church, or we're going to, only certain colors are allowed, or any of those things. Never, ever, ever. And it was taught to me as a pastor there about the human race, because that's what God teaches. And that never changed. But see, one person can go online and make a video and put a headline out and try and change everything that was done for 75 plus years in just a couple of minutes, and then not be held accountable for it. But here's what you have to remember. It's not our job to hold him accountable. It's his job to hold himself accountable, number one. And number two, God won't be mocked. Remember that. So at this point, it's not for us to criticize, it's not for us to rip on it. We don't need to. Let God handle it. But it ties into the discussion that we have to have today. And that is the chaos that we have when it comes to conflict. And those conflicts take place when it's in relationships. Yeah, it would be easy for us to go and turn and to mount a charge and go and say, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, and you've been waiting this long to say this, and you couldn't wait. We just don't need to. But there are times when you kind of have to step back and say, enough's enough, take it for what it is, and eliminate times to sit back and say nothing. And I'll tell you something, it's difficult at times, right? When you're standing with someone and they're saying something, you're like, oh my goodness, everything you say is a lie, and you don't even realize it. When you're standing with something and they're screaming you down or yelling you down to get their way, and you're going, would they just stop? And so the quickest thing to do is just to say nothing so it will go away. And so how do we deal with that? Or sometimes even that we come in and we walk in and all of a sudden everyone's gone. And the people that were there just decided to up and leave. It could be a husband, a wife, a child, grandchild, mom, dad, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden they're just gone. Our lives are too precious, and this time that we have here before God is too precious. And the chaos that comes with the conflict within those relationships hold us down and hold us back from the things that are truly important. Being a husband that gave the vows before God, or a wife that gave those vows. Being a mom or a dad, the greatest roles on this planet. And if someone couldn't have a child for uncle, or as an uncle or as an aunt, or as and someone within the community, whatever it might be. Every relationship that we have can be a loving relationship, but every relationship, sadly, can also have a lot of conflict. Paul gives us just a quick look-see today as to how to deal with that conflict that we all have and we all know that we have. And so as we're going through today, I want you to ask yourself about that conflict. And at the end, I'm going to show you, we're going to give you away. There'll be a little participation. We're going to kneel. We're going to genuflect. We're going to stand. I'm just we're not going to do that. We're not going to stand up at the end. We're going to do something to finish this. We are in Ephesians chapter 4. Let me start here real quick so that you know. Ephesians is one. If you ever wanted to read a book how they tie together this epistle from Paul, this letter they wrote, he's writing to the church in Ephesus. And it's one of the most amazing stories that has ever taken place in our history. When Paul showed up, this city was 99.9% for the goddess Artemis or the goddess Diana, depending on how you look at it, for the Greek and Roman side. Within one generation, because they loved people, and there was major conflict. You can read about it in Acts chapter 19. There was major conflict that took place back and forth. They filled an entire amphitheater just to yell at him. They were there for hours and hours and hours. Two guys went up and they gave it to him for hours and hours and hours once again. And they just stood there and they took it. This entire city went from 99.9% literally pagan worship to being a Christian city within one generation, which is 70 years. That's the power that God can have at any time. So Paul's writing this letter to them. He's writing to them because he's already been a missionary to it, and he's writing back saying, hey, here's some reminders, here's some things that you have to watch for. And so he starts in, and this is verse 25 in chapter 4. And he says this, he says, therefore, and anytime you see therefore, we stop because we look to see what the next thing he talks about is, because there's a reason that is there for. So therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to his neighbor, for you're all members of one body. So he starts by saying, listen, this isn't just a message for the ladies. This isn't just a message for the men. It isn't just for the tall people or the short people. It isn't for just the couples. It isn't for the ones who play sports. And he says, each one of you. So he puts it to each one of us, and we now have to make a decision. So he says this, you and I, we should put off falsehood and speak truthfully. So the first thing we need to do, there's a step here, is we've got to put all that false stuff aside. And we all know people or been around people that they can't help but live in falsehood. They don't know how to tell the truth. They can't see the truth. They can't even grasp a hold of it. But you can and I can. Because we're believers, we're going to give this to God enough to where we have something within our spirit. As a believer, there should be something in your spirit that says, that's not right. That doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense. You're telling me this about this guy that I've known for 10, 15, 20 years who's never shown it to me one bit at all. And now all of a sudden, you're telling me this is how he was, or 70 or 75 years. Or he died 45 years ago, and now all of a sudden you're going to bring this up. That makes no sense. So we need to put off that falsehood. And he says you must put off the falsehood and speak truthfully to his neighbor, for we are all members of one body. So when we speak, our words need to be truthful. So that's the first thing that we need to take from today. When you are talking, are the words that you're saying truthful? Do they have meaning behind them? Are they something that's going to lift someone up? And at times, being truthful, can they be painful but helpful? Many times we talk about as far as speaking in truth, people think, well, that means you got to go confront someone, you got to yell at them, you got to raise your voice, you got to tell them like it is, you got to talk them down, you got to speak to the end of your finger. That's not what Paul is saying. Paul is saying you need to speak truthfully. In fact, in verse 15 earlier, he says when we speak it, we need to speak it in love. And so the tones that we use and the voices that we use and the words that we use, they can all be truthful and they can all be very much filled with love, but they don't have to be yelling. They don't have to be screaming. They don't have to be, putting someone down. They don't have to include name calling. They don't need to be any of those things. They need to be with love. And if you need to know what the definition of love is, go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. These words should be patient. They should be kind. They shouldn't keep record of wrongs. They should build trust. They should always persevere. They should bring hope. And in the end, they should never fail. Those are the kind of words that Paul's saying. If you use these and you have conflict in your life, you need to address them truthfully. but you need to do so in love. Once again, the people that we walk down the aisle with, or the person, that we walk down the aisle with, and we said our vows to, the ones that God blessed us with, that we came home from the hospital, the ones that, oh my goodness, my kids are all grown now I have grandbabies. Those ones that God has put before us, that we need to be truthful and loving to. But it also means strangers. It also means people that you haven't met yet. It also means people in your community, people within your schools, people within your workplace. So put off the falsehood, take away the falsehood, and speak in truth, in love. Verse 29, he says this. He says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, and it may benefit those who listen. Look what happened here. So if we put off the falsehood, we rest and we speak in the truth in love, and Paul gives us direction. Do not let any unwholesome talk. Man, I've got this one thing, and everyone's got to know. And if they just knew this one thing, that's not your place. But I heard that with this one person, I heard this. This is what someone told me. That's not your place. That's called gossip. But so-and-so needs a prayer request, and this is what I think that prayer request is around. Stop. This is how we've always done things, and that guy's in here, and he's trying to change things around, and this isn't how our family or how our workforce, this isn't how we do things. We need to do whatever we can. Stop. We cannot be the ones to bring that. We need to be the ones that are above that. We need to put that falsehood away and say, is this truthful? Is it in love? Because it needs to be in accordance with God's word. So he says this, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building up others according to their needs. Whose needs? See, when you speak and I speak many times, I'm going to share things with you that will fill my needs. Hey, you came to me with this question, and I'm going to give you this answer, and this is great, but at the end of the day, it's going to benefit me. It's going to lift me up. It's going to lift my family up. It's going to lift my kids up. That's not people that we need to have in our lives, but we need to confront it and say, listen, man, I love you. You've been my friend for a long, long time, and I've turned to you for things, but at the end of the day, I feel like you're doing this for yourself and not for me. You need to start looking out for me when I come to you for things, and not be afraid to say that. But at the same time, we need to be the ones practicing that. So who do we need in our life? If we tie to the conflict, the chaos from last week, people that love the Lord, people that love us no matter what, people that have our best interests at heart. If you're a teenager, if you're a young person today, you think your mom and dad, at some point in some time, they were crazy. And if you're not a teenager, but you remember being a teenager, there was a point in time when you thought your mom and dad were absolutely crazy. They hit their dumbest stretch when you were in your teens to early 20s. And then one day, it happened. And you said the one thing that you said you would never say, and it's not a swear word. You said whatever it is that mom or dad said. And you were like, oh my goodness, I've turned into my mom or dad. Right? I cannot even believe. And if they're still alive, you're calling them up and going, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry for the last 30, 35, 38, 40 years, whatever it is. How in the world did you put up with me? Right? We're all there. We've all been there. But for the teenagers now, you feel like Mom and Dad are on your back. Yes, I know I have to do this, and yes, I know I have to jump, and yes, I know I have to keep the speed limit. Yes, I know I have to watch who I hang out with, and yes, I know I shouldn't be at that party and all that. You're on my back, on my back, and one day it's going to kick in, you're going to go, oh my goodness, they were the ones that had my back. So parents, you never stop. You don't stop talking to me through those years. Because if you do it in love, and you put away the falsehood, and you're doing it in truth, and at the end of the day, you're doing it for their best interests, you're following the path that God would have you follow. He finishes the verse and he says that building up others according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. For our teenagers, for our spouses, for our kids. Once again, for their needs. See, when you walk down the aisle, guys and gals, there's a time where it's either a unity candle, there's a time for sand, there's a time for the braiding of the cords, whatever it might be. And there's a time where you either blow out that candle or pour out that sand, and you pour yourself out completely to pour yourself completely into that other person. And those two have become one. And when you have children, you do the same thing. Whatever dreams, aspirations, all those other kind of things, you chose to have that child, you put it on hold. For some of you, your grandparents, you're like, I'm done raising my kids, and all of a sudden, this grandchild or this younger child came in my life that I have to take care of. And you put everything aside. God has you there for that reason. God has us to be there for that sacrifice. God has us there because He knows that you are strong enough, and He has made you strong enough to put yourself aside for that other person. But you need to do so in truth, and you need to do so in love. Next verses. We're going to go back here, and it says, Ephesians, this is 4:25, 26. In your anger, here's the tough one, all right? Because there's got to be a flip side. In your anger, it says, do not sin. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. So, here's the next thing. Have you ever been angry? You don't have to answer that, because I already know the answer. We were at a softball game yesterday for 14-year-old girls. I'm not even a coach. I almost got, the other day, I was a help coach, and I was at first base, and they stopped the game because I had slides on, and I didn't have a regular shoe, and the umpire was like, you're not allowed to coach. And I'm like, I'm not playing. Why does that matter? And he was like, well, we can't have the game until you get regular shoes on. Well, I didn't bring regular shoes, so I'm not supposed to coach, right? I'm like, I'll sign a waiver. The guy's like, I didn't bring a waiver. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I was like, seriously, I was like, would anybody notice if I throat punch this guy right now? Right? Because like, you gotta have all this, I mean, like, he deserved it. All right? I mean, I'm not playing, this is not a big deal, but a guy literally that was gonna go in, the coach, he said, what size shoe you wear? And I go, 12. He took his shoes off because he didn't want to coach, so I had to wear his shoes the whole game. And if you've never worn someone else's shoes, it's kind of weird because your feet don't fit the same way their shoes. So I went to coach. So here we are yesterday. He's like, hey, I need help. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll go coach again. So I go out and coach, and I love the girls because they're all fun, but they all kind of get mad because they're 14, and there's just a lot going on with 14-year-old girls. See, if you laugh, you all know that. But I grew up with 6 sisters, but none of them were all, there wasn't 10 of them that were 14 years of age at the same time, right? So they have to go through these things, they go through the ups and downs, you're just trying to keep them smiling. And our head coach, I think he is such a good coach with these girls. He's very calm, he doesn't get too excited. You know, when he talks to them, you know, he's just got that nice, easy, calming voice kind of thing. And when I was younger as a coach, I was that freaking out coach, but now I'm just like, hey man, he's the coach, whatever he says goes kind of thing. So we bring all the girls in, everything's going fine. We get done with the game, and the two teams are shaking hands. Good game, good luck, good game, good luck. Hey, I like the way you play, good job, that kind of stuff. Good game, coach, good luck, that kind of stuff. This is not a tournament game, it's just a setup for the tournament today. So it's not like a big deal. Whoever wins, loses, they just receive it, no big deal. We get done, and I walk into the dugout, and all of a sudden I see my girls, and they're all kind of like looking past me. They're not my girls, or other people's girls with the team. They're kind of looking past me, and I look back, and this head coach is a big old teddy bear. The other coach from the other team is literally attacking him. He's like verbally ripping on him left and right. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I go running out, and I have deceiving strength, just so you know, I'm much weaker than I appear. So I go out, and I grab a hold of this guy, and I get my chest kind of up big, and I'm like, stop it. And I grab our coach. I know, tough guy, right? I grab our coach, and we're just trying to get him away to stop this whole thing. Here's the thing. I was angry for about 2 seconds that a guy would do this in front of all these kids. But the anger stops because you've got to get that person away from him. And he told me, he goes, I was ticked because I couldn't believe that a guy, that he would say the things that he was saying. And obviously, thankfully, it was out of the kids, being able to hear it. But they're having a discussion back and forth, and all these people around, all I can think is, we're going to end up on YouTube somewhere, right? Someone's going to videotape it. It's going to go viral because of 2 stupid guys, or 4 stupid guys now at the time, all getting in a fight over a girls' softball game, and it ended too early. But that's what happens. We all of a sudden get into something, and our anger just rises right now. And we freak out about stuff. And Paul is very explicit about this. He says, listen, when you anger, you are sinning. When you are so angry that you can't see God in the moment, if you push God to the backside, let's put off all the falsehood, let's say the truth. When you get that angry and words come out of your mouth and they come out of your heart, which is the overflow, which comes out of our mouth, and we start getting angry, we start banging stuff and throwing stuff around, all those other kind of things, there's going to be an outcome from it that you cannot control. Don't let it happen. You've got to stop long enough, as the Bible says, to be slow to speak I'm sorry, be quick to listen and slow to speak. Be quick to listen. There's an actual step 1, step 2. Be quick to listen and slow to speak. Or that anger's going to come out, and then you're going to have to deal with it later. You're going to push it down, you're going to push it away, you're going to pretend it never happened, but you are going to know that you have to deal with that anger. It's going to come out. It is a sin because you have not put God first in that. And so he says this, don't even let the sun go down on it. Don't let the day finish if that's happening. And many times, where does that anger come about? I was in the middle of my plan. I was on step 12 of 18 steps. And then this person showed up and screwed up my day and messed everything up. And now I'm going to let them have it. And who is it I'm letting have it? My wife, my husband, my child, my dog, my best friend, my brother, my sister, whoever it is. It's almost always someone that's closest to us. And we crush them. All because something rose inside of us, and then we let it out on them. And Paul's saying this, if you're going to speak in truth, you're going to speak in love, you're going to put the falsehood aside, you've got to know this. Anger is going to be a big thing that's going to affect you and me. And it's going to come out. But if it does, because it's going to happen, don't wait until the end of the day to deal with it. Because you're missing the mark with me, is what God says. Don't allow it to happen. Take the steps that are necessary. Otherwise, you're going to have chaos. And you're going to have conflict in the relationships that matter the most. Don't worry, I'm going to give you a way to fix it here in a little bit. Isn't that nice? Actually, I'm not going to give it to you. Paul's going to give it to us. But we're going to have a way to fix it, which is going to take us to step 3. Next verse. It says this, Ephesians 4:28. Anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must work doing something useful with their own hands, that they may have something to share with those in need. So he says, when that happens, use your hands. Literally take something to where you can work and take off the steam and put it away, whatever it might be, and help someone in need. Help someone that's in need. Go spend some time with them. You may not know how to do everything, but if it's something that they enjoy, go enjoy it with them. Maybe it's something they don't enjoy, but they need help with. Mowing the yard, weed eating, help them pull weeds, taking out their trash, helping someone with their groceries in a parking lot, whatever it might be. Take that, take your person, and go and help someone else in need. It takes away some of the chaos and the conflict that we have within our relationships. Next verse. Ephesians 4:1. It says, as a prisoner of the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. So each one of us has received some kind of calling. And Paul is saying this, as a prisoner of the Lord, then I urge you to live that life that is worthy before God, which many of you, when you come to me, that you've talked about. Man, I want to know God's purpose. I want to know that God has a purpose. I want to know that I have a purpose with God. I want to know where those two meet. I want to know that it's out there. God is urging you to live that life before Him and with Him so that you can be that loving person. Next verse. 1 Thessalonians 4:11-12. It says, and to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, so that you will not be dependent on anybody. Now, this is a really tough verse, because you're constantly challenged with loving others and caring for others. But there is a time where the work that we do alone, because we need to be lifted up with God, so that we can go back to reach out and care for others. And so, having that quiet time, but not just having it with yourself, but to have it with God so that He can build you up to deal with others. Because quite frankly, there are times when you're going to deal with people that the best thing for you to say is nothing at all. You can confront them in love, and you can put the falsehood aside, and you can be as truthful as possible, and they may not be able to see it, they may not even care, because they've already made a decision. But don't allow them to beat you up so much that you stop providing and caring for others in need. There's always someone that's in need. There's always someone that needs a big brother or a big sister. There's always someone that's hurting that needs the love. There's always someone that needs to know that they're cared for. And in this day and age, there's always someone that needs to know that God is out there and loves them. And it's up to us to bring that hope. Next verse. Galatians 6, 2 and 3 says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. So it goes back to the fact that we can very easily deceive ourselves when we put ourselves ahead of everyone, and especially ahead of God. So how do we handle all this? How do we deal with all this conflict, this chaos in our life? Go ahead and go to the next verse if you would, please. Galatians 6, 4 and 5 says, each one should test their own actions, then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. But each one should carry their own load. So this is on you and this is on me. This isn't just on you. I want to point this out. This is on you and this is on me. I know what my load is. I understand my load. This is a load that I have to bear. This is a load that I have to take. And you're saying to me, but your load's not my load. You don't understand. I don't. If God's giving you a bigger load, then He trusts you more. If God's giving you less of a load, He doesn't trust you as much. We all have a different load. We have to take accountability for our actions, for our words, for the things that rise up inside of us, for our anger, as to why we're doing it. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to have this conflict. It's going to continue to rage in every area of our life. It's going to continue to affect the ones that we love the most and that love us the most. Whether it's our spouse, kids, grandkids, friends, neighbors, whatever it might be, teammates, we will have this conflict constantly unless we give it to God. Go ahead, John, if you move to the next verse. Galatians 6:6. Nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the Word should share all good things with their instructor. All right, move on, John. Last part. Ephesians 4:30 and 31. It says this, and do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. And verse 32, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave. Who did God forgive? He forgave you. He forgave me. So here's what we're going to do. I want everyone to stand. Does everyone know how to genuflect? I'm just kidding. We can teach over there, all right? Now, so here's the deal. At the end of the day, we have to make the choice to be kind and compassionate. Yep, I get angry. Yeah, I get bothered. Yeah, I've got relationships that there's conflict in. Yeah, there are times when I don't act, or I don't say, or I don't do the things that I should, and I know that I don't want to be there anymore. So He gives us these instructions. He says, be kind and compassionate. Be kind and compassionate. That's so simple. I can be kind. I can be compassionate. Sometimes being kind might just be a smile and walking the other way. Sometimes being kind is jumping in with our hands and helping someone. Sometimes being kind is just a smile or just a word to just say hello. Holding open a door. It's so easy to do. Being compassionate means I look at you and the things that are going on in your life and say, how is it that I can be kind that shows you compassion because I understand the struggles that you're going through. I see you all working alone and I know something's going on. Hey man, what's going on? You doing all right? Shoot me straight. Don't give me that, oh, I'm good, everything's fine, that kind of stuff. Being kind is a choice. Being compassionate is looking at that other person and saying, I understand that you're going through some stuff right now. I understand that you have a struggle. I see the things that are taking place. I know that there's a past that you can't come to grips with. I understand all those things. But through this kindness and through this compassion, I'm going to make a difference because that's what God wants me to do. But for us personally, this is where it has to start. We've got to stop the conflict, and it has to start with us. So here's what we're going to do. You ready? Wherever you stand, I want you to just go like this. Just make a circle around you. All right? Oh, some of you guys, that's a terrible circle. Yours might have been more old than you. Just notice that. All right? So we're going to circle around it. All right, that's a conflict circle. You're not going to allow any conflict into it. Okay, she just stepped 6 feet away from her husband. So that scares me, right? But yet, peace, I think, is a wonderful. He is a super kind and compassionate guy. But all of a sudden, this guy got in a circle, and the conflict arose. That's what happens. We've got to draw that conflict circle and say, there's no conflict coming in here today. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to allow it in. If there's any falsehood, it goes out of the circle. If I have to have a conversation, I'm going to do it truthfully, but I'm going to do so in love. If I need to get away with God a little bit, I'm going to take me and my circle, we're going to go spend some time, and then I'm going to go help someone in their needs. You know how I'm going to do it? I'm going to be kind and compassionate. No matter what. Now here's the thing. If you're here with someone, if you're standing next to your spouse, you're standing next to your dad, you're standing next to your son, whatever it might be, it's time to make a bigger circle. So now I want you to make a bigger circle around the different people that are around you, all right? Go ahead and make it. So, okay, keep going. All right, now see, now I feel bad because Casey's here and John's in the back. So, but she might bring it up. You know what? Make it have a circle behind you. You know, go back. Go back. Get our hands will touch. Lily won't. Wait. We didn't even practice that. Could you tell? All right? But that was our kindness. Listen, we're not allowing that conflict in. Sometimes within that conflict, there's someone that you need to protect. And sometimes that protection is being kind and compassionate, point saying, listen, this stuff happens. It's life. And we all deal with it. Let's be kind. And let's be compassionate. And let's practice it. Let's start today. Let's start with all the relationship that God brings into our life. Because there's so many people out there that don't have it. And there's so many people out there that aren't seeing it. And it's because there's so many of us that aren't choosing to be just those two simple words, kind and compassionate. But if we can choose those two things, we can get rid of the falsehood, we can hold on to the truth, and we can start seeing God move in our lives. And we fill the needs that others need. Joe, bow your heads, please, so we can say a word of prayer. Tracy's going to come up and they're going to play a final song here. And that song is How Great Thou Art. I love that they chose the song for today. My prayer is that we can lift our voices up to God and just give this to Him. But before we get there, would you just take a minute or two? Andy's going to come up and he's going to play for a little bit. Just as you're standing, I want you to think about the circle that you just drew. I want you to think about the circle that you drew around you and the circle that you're going to draw around others that you love and care for later today. I want you to think about seeking to speak the truth and putting away all the falsehood. Dealing with those times when, yeah, we all get angry, but they take over our life at times when we're missing out on things that are important. Then I'm going to make the choice of being kind and compassionate with my words and caring for every person that God brings into my life. God, we give you this time. Lord, we know that there's constant chaos everywhere we go. Lord, would you help us to deal with it? Lord, in the times when we fail and we don't deal with it well, Lord, would you help us to turn that to you and try to take that step back to see you in those moments? God, if it's our kids, if it's our spouses, that we lift them up and we don't do things to fill our own needs, but to help to fulfill theirs. And God, for every person that we come in contact with at the end of the day, Lord, we choose to be kind. But we look at them in their shoes and understand that that also means that we need to be compassionate. God, help us to love others just as you love us. We give you this time. In the name we pray.